Excellent. Somebody out there would miss you on. That's all right. We'll wait until you get up. Right, we've got 30 minutes and an awful lot to get through. Alec was very kind in giving over this half hour to trade bodies. Just a quick one. How many people here are a member of a trade body? Excellent. How many of you are a member of a trade body that are currently sitting down here? Excellent work. So you all roughly know what they do, and there's no pressure on when are all your membership subscriptions up? Around now, isn't it usually? Okay, very quickly, the aim of this panel is to see where we can all start collaborating more. It's what Alec has put his store by in this conference. So we're finishing up on hopefully some big themes and places of work where the 4 trade associations and any other trade associations that may or may not be in the room can get together and start working. But first, I think the most important thing is to realize what their priorities are and some of the things that they're working on to see if we can find any themes that are emerging. So I'm going to start with Vicky. 90-second elevator pitch. What's the most important priority your members have got and the 3 activities that you're planning to do this year? She looks surprised. She had the briefing. I'm doing just like off the cuff.
A lot has happened since then. Hi everyone, I'm Vicky from ChargeUK. Thanks for having me. So we have a very, very long list of things that we want to do and would like to do. But there is one issue that has risen to the top in the last few months, and it's got a 3-letter acronym beginning with Z. I think you may have talked about it already today. Because what matters right now is EVs on the road, customers for charge point operators. And there was a quite important meeting yesterday we were at, which was actually very helpful in terms of bringing some of these things to a head, and I think a pretty consequential meeting. So we're spending an awful lot of time thinking about how to move that forward in a really positive way. So I think that's number 1, and possibly 2 and 3 as well at the moment. But also trying to keep moving at the same time, all the barriers, grid connections, planning, permits, that sort of thing. Also on the kind of consumer experience and consumer kind of cost side, how to make things as affordable as possible, how to make things as easy as possible.
Fantastic. I actually used to be a director of policy at a trade body, and to try and get your members to realise that you can't have 78 priorities in one association. You really do need to try and narrow it down. So I appreciate the hard work this is going to be trying to narrow it down into just 1 priority and 3 actions. A trade body I have not been part of or worked with.
Good afternoon, everyone. David Boyer, the Director of Electricity Systems for the Energy Networks Association. So we represent all of the networks, particularly electricity networks in Britain. And I'm going to give the 3 focuses for the next 12 months because I probably couldn't pick one of them, I think. First is strategic planning and investment planning. So right now, as many of you will know, we're in the transition from the last price control period to the next. The transmission operators are submitting their final investment plans for the next 5 years. The distribution network operators are engaging with the regulator on what that framework will look like. All of that's really important because the next regulatory period will set out the time to get us to clean power 2030, the government's new stated target, and also, it's a critical set of years on our path to net zero more generally. So that strategic planning and next round of investment planning is a big priority. Second priority next on that in the next 12 months is connections reform. Grid connections, access to capacity has obviously come up and continues to be really important. There's a huge program of reforms that are going on generally, but also there's quite a significant focus on the strategic transmission access reform program. Its alignment with the Clean Power 2030 targets and implementing that to unblock all of that is a major focus, as well as a much broader, extensive set of priorities within connections reform. And the last, I'm going to broadly just lump everything into keeping all of the core operations and customer services on track, continue to be delivered, keep the lights on. All of the core business operation networks run, often are unsung. Britain's networks are some of the most reliable in the world. That doesn't come by accident. So that kind of focus on the core operations and customer service, particularly in connections in this space, is important. The last kind of category I would add, it's easy to assume or to kind of infer from the connections challenge I just mentioned that connections aren't being delivered, EV chargers aren't getting connected, etc. But last year, networks connected more from a just network capacity connections point of view than they ever had before, and that trend is continuing. So that core program of just keeping that service running is the last area I'd mention.
Brilliant. Thank you. Association I know slightly better. Matt, please.
Yeah, hi everyone. So yeah, I'm Matt Adams. I work for the Renewable Energy Association. So we're the largest renewable energy trade body in the country. And well, we don't just represent EVs, but also solar, battery storage, wind, geothermal, etc. And so yeah, of course, grid connections is going to be one of those big issues for us, but that stretches across almost all of our technologies that we represent. But then, just off the sort of breadth of our membership on the EV space, we've also got a pretty complex number of policy asks as well. I know. So, you see today some of the sponsors here, Drax, Trojan, Quello, some of our members on the CPO and charging side, but then we've got the likes of, ZapMap near the back of the room, I think, and Syzygy, Dynamon, Field Dynamics, Hitrans, Net Zero Evolution, etc. So because of the broad width of members,
I'm going to push you. I want one priority in 3 activities.
Okay, so one priority will be, of course, accelerating infrastructure rollout, and the three sort of priority areas, I suppose, for me will be improving accessibility for fleet vehicles in particular, accelerating EV infrastructure rollout, of course, and probably also getting a right to charge at some point to help unlock charging for the sort of 9 million rental properties across the UK.
Fantastic. I think this conference has been missing the firm hand of my chairmanship the entire way to Catherine.
Hi everyone. BVRLA, we represent rental, leasing and fleet management. Our members have a combined fleet of 4 million vehicles. My priority, I think, to summarise everything we're doing, would be that we make the transition work for everybody. So we already spoke about fleets leading the transition. There are some member segments, however, that are struggling. So where we see strong incentives like the benefit in kind taxation, things are going really well. Rental is a challenge. Not everybody wants to rent an EV at this point in time. And also adoption of electric vans, which we've heard about earlier, is really struggling. In terms of our 3 activities, first one would be on used BEVs. So we would like to see more support on the used market. RVs for EVs, goodness me, I don't know, have already fallen 50% in the last 3 years. They're predicted to fall again 28% by 2030. And it's really important that we have a healthy used market. It really doesn't underpin a healthy new market as well. So we would like to see more support for the used market. On the infrastructure side of things, there are 2 parts. The first would be to continue working with the charging industry, but also with local authorities so that we get fit for fleet charging infrastructure. That includes the large number of vans that are taken home. The other bit on infrastructure is grid connections. So we've been doing a lot of really good work with the ENA, looking at how we can help people navigate what can be a very complex process. A lot of fleet operators have never had to get involved in the energy space before. It can be a slightly confusing language and a very difficult process. So hopefully there's some guidance coming from the ENA shortly, which I think will be really, really welcome. And then finally, on vans, we've done some brilliant work with Matt and a number of other partners where we formed a coalition looking at what support we need to increase EVAN adoption. So we're going to keep up that good work and keep pushing for change.
Fantastic. I mean, a lot of priorities there, and obviously some of them have changed in the last week. It's been a very quickly moving landscape. It is a really key year ahead. And suddenly things that we didn't think were going to be in scope are in scope. A lot of things have to fall into place. I'm going to start with the first thing. I'm going to start with Vicky, where I think the ZEV mandate and the continuation of the ZEV mandate and how it gets rolled out was always going to be important. It feels like there's probably a real need for more collaboration and more work on that, certainly coming out of this week. So what are your thoughts about how we can coordinate? What sort of things can other trade bodies and other people in the room do around your work in trying to secure the ZEV mandate?
So I think, for a start, that there was 3 of us here, and not individuals, but 3 organisations were in this meeting yesterday. And I think actually, although perhaps one of the most talked about meetings before it actually happened, in the room itself, actually was a huge amount of agreement on lots of things. In particular on the need to stimulate demand and also the need for certainty, and that applied on all sides. And if SMMT were here as well, we'd be saying the same. So I think moving on to make sure that this works for everyone, because the fact is that, you know, you can't sell EVs without charging, and you can't sell charging without EVs. These two things need to move together. All these sectors need to move forward together, including we all need to collaborate. Is actually to try and come out of that and identify, you know, where we do agree, where some really deep thinking needs to take place, and also to help guide the government, who've got a pretty tricky thing to pull off here, which is to move this forward, having had some quite strong, cases made to them in the last few weeks. So I think on the stage here, I think we all already have lots of collaboration, and, you know, I spend a lot of my time with our associations. I think we've also got a job to do to make sure that the members we represent understand each other. Some of the challenges are not just, you know, how to move things forward, but actually just explaining how things work from different sectors. These are new sectors not having to work together. So I think we've got a responsibility, but we've already started with that job, I think.
I think one of the things where people can work together on this subject is that we've seen in the news in the last couple of days that industry say this, industry say that. I think sometimes some industries seem to count more than others, or at least fit into either politicians' minds or the public minds. I think we have to say that this isn't, industry is not pushing back on ZEV mandate. Catherine, you've got industry members, Vicky, Matt, and yourself. All of them have industry. So is that something that you can sort of say, look, here's another industry that really needs this to work? I don't know what work you're doing. I suppose it's been fairly 24 hours, but trying to get a plan together for that on ZEV mandate.
Yeah, I think that the van point is probably the one where we've been most focused, because if the phase out target does come back to 2030, which it's going to, I think, then it is going to be really tough for vans to meet that. And so I think the consultation that we're expecting soon, hopefully, not at Christmas, I think, yeah, we do need to push for more support for vans, because trying to make that 2030 is going to be impossible. So I think they do need that extension to 2035, because there are very few hybrid vans. So yeah, that would be a big area of focus.
I'm going to move on to the ENA, because you sort of have quite an important key role in this, and it's sort of the connection side of it is often highlighted as something that could be slowing down the transition. How are you working in the next year for that? You mentioned the connections plan and sort of the connections work you're doing. Where can the rest of us fit into the work that you're doing over the next 12 months?
So definitely a big focus in this space. I think that some of the things I'd call attention to in the way we're first at a high level, the collaboration point we've been touching on is hugely important, and I think this is where trade associations, we should be playing an important role. When things work well, it's a significant accelerator of that collaboration and kind of rowing together. At kind of connections reform and solutions that our customer networks are focused on at the moment. This year saw the establishment of Connect Direct, which is a single digital portal for all residential LCT connection processes to flow through. That's already seen a huge take up and a huge benefit in terms of the ease of processing, the consistency of processing for individual households to get things like EV chargers connected. So that's continuing to operationalize that and expand its rollout. That's one focus. The conversations we've been having with ChargeUK around aligned best practices, similar principles around commercials and approaches to access and rights, for example, that would allow connection EV chargers to be installed and the network assets that support them to be installed as efficiently and as smoothly as possible. That's a big focus for us. And similarly, as Catherine mentioned, the kind of clear guidance for fleet stakeholders to understand how to engage with networks, when to engage with networks, what to consider in their plans. That's really important. So those are the kinds of things we're focused on. And again, I just come back to that continuous and really important, high importance of early engagement between networks and these stakeholders. Some of the worst stories you hear about challenges around grid connection will often go back to assets being built prior to even asking for a connection or prior to engaging with the network operator. So the earlier those conversations happen, the more clear those inputs to the network's reinforcement plans are, then the better the outcome is for all.
So fast forward to this event in 12 months' time. What's sort of the one biggest tangible thing you think we can achieve that's going to make that connections environment landscape better?
I think broadly across connections, at a general level, it will be the implementation of the transmission access connections reform and all the associated processes that mean more customers connecting to the distribution networks will be able to do so without the impacts of the waiting for transmission infrastructure, and the improvement of kind of having reset the queue for all those, for all the projects that are progressing and that support Clean Power 2030 to move forward. That's the big milestone that the networks will focus on next year.
I'm going to open that up to anybody else. If anybody else has any high ambitions for that.
I've got a bit of a bee in my bonnet. I really think that we need to educate, and we need to do it jointly. We all need to be doing it. But I've been in so many presentations recently where people are talking about vehicle to grid and how it's going to help with, protecting the energy in the future and, the whole connections process. I just think if we're not educating people now about how to think in the future, we're lining ourselves up for a big problem. And so we need to be thinking about that education now and how we best educate. And I think we're flooded with loads of guidance. So I don't think guidance is the right way, but I think we just all need to be having an open conversation. Quite often when we're engaging with the ENA and the DNOs, the first question is, what's your future demand look like? And quite honestly, a lot of fleets just don't know. And I think that came up earlier. So how do we educate fleets so that they can answer that question? And then that will help the DNOs to sort of predict future demand. But yeah, we need to be doing that education now.
And I suppose, earlier this week there was also another roundtable on comms, and the comms roundtable was quite interesting because there were some sort of key priority areas and messaging that I think hopefully everyone here and further is going to start agreeing on and pushing out collectively, and that should help hopefully sort of penetrate the consciousness of the wider consumer, which would be great if you have that consistent messaging. Things like vehicle to grid, smart charging, driveway sharing, cross pavement, etc., is going to be there as well further down the line, but it will be there. And I think actually that in itself would be quite powerful if we're all actually united behind one thing. So we all say they're quite similar things, but in slightly different ways, and sometimes that's lost on the consumer a bit and on journalists as well. So I think having that united voice would be quite powerful going forwards.
Anything to add, Vicky?
So success on grid, and I realise we're kind of looking at you a lot here, but I think we're all doing something quite difficult and trying to move from a situation where we're doing individual transactions to something at scale, and that's challenging, especially when there are different companies doing things in different ways on both sides. So, and we've seen lots of really great progress in the last 12 months, 18 months, and one of the companies is here talking earlier about the way in which we've engaged to help sort out problems. So for me, a huge win for this time next year, if I'm invited back to speak again, would be if we're seeing progress across all the DNOs. It doesn't need to be identical, but I think we just want engagement, because you can sort out a huge amount just by getting around the table. So that would be my big win.
Somebody taking minutes. I always should check that, just make sure we can come back in 12 months' time and check where we are at. Matt, you're doing some work on right to charge, which seems fascinating. Right to charge seems to mean an awful lot of things to an awful lot of people. What does it mean to you? And maybe what does it mean to the rest of the panel?
Sure. So I suppose, first of all, to get a bit of context, right? So last year we wrote a report. In that report, we spoke to Elbil, the Norwegian EV Trade Association, or the equivalent of Norwegian EVA England, essentially. And if that makes sense. And they helped introduce a right to charge in Norway. And what that meant was essentially that a tenant could ask their landlord or building owner or property or board, housing board, to install a charge point for them at their property. Now, there, of course, are ways to protect the landlord within that as well. So it's not just they have the absolute right. And I think the Norwegian model is sort of a good starting point. But it can be evolved a bit more. So you see in like the US, like Colorado and California, they've got slightly evolved versions that protect the landlord a little more. So looking around things like the costing and the cost to connect to the grid. But then in the UK, we could probably improve on that a bit further still. So we could actually look at, are we really going to say that let's say there are 100 tenants in a multi-occupancy building? Are they all going to be able to install a different charge point that looks slightly different? And each time they install one, the cost to connect will be more expensive. Well, maybe what we should be doing is saying, okay, well, if you're a landlord, you either do an EV zone and you start maybe with a third of the car park or something. They put in 1 or 2 charge points and then you put in wiring for the rest. Maybe that would be a good way of cost saving in the long run. or or you go the full Monty and go one cable in every parking space. That could also be another way of doing it. I think doing it that way will probably be more cost effective in the long run, and hopefully that would also lower the cost for the landlords and bring them on side and something like this, because I know landlords are a really important stakeholder in this, and we do need to take them with us. It's not something we can just stick them with. There needs to be some cooperation. So we're working very hard at the moment to provide a briefing for OZEV, working with landlords and other stakeholders to make this a reality. So hopefully we'll be able to update you next year on how that's gone.
And Catherine, this must be something for your members. I mean, we all have a certain picture of what an EV driver looks like, but I guess once you get into fleets, it really sort of sprays about what the demographic is, and people might not have the sort of perfect setup to having an EV. So I'm assuming this is an area you're keen on too.
Yeah, back to vans again. One of the big challenges, and it's with infrastructure, is accessibility for vans and where they charge. So I think there is a bit of a misperception that vans all go back to a depot, and they don't. Quite a large number get taken home by the driver and taken home. Earlier on, we saw, the number of people without a private driveway being a third. I think when it comes to fleets that take their vans home, that's quite a lot higher. We've always used a Centrica British Gas figure that they estimate about 75-80% of their drivers won't have the ability to charge at home. So there are a huge number of vans that need some form of charging. Now, we've reached out to local authorities. We do an annual Freedom of Information request, and then we have an index where we ask, do you have an EV strategy? Do you have a dedicated resource? And also, are you engaging with the fleet community? And we did it for the second year this year. We saw some improvement, but it was still 60% of local authorities weren't engaging with fleet. And by fleet, we don't just mean vans. We're talking car clubs, taxis, Motability operation customers. Fleet is huge. So that's a very large proportion that aren't engaging with fleet. But we do need to cater for, and I'm not saying that the local authority has to come up with all of the solutions. I think sharing of infrastructure, we'll see a lot more of that. Community hubs, can we use the guy from Sainsbury's earlier, can we use supermarkets, leisure centres, so that fleets can do that charging when they need to. But yeah, that's definitely an area of focus and something that we need to collaborate and see some action on.
And David, you were sort of nodding sort of in an approving way about how there's sort of, it feels like there might be some troubles with connections around this side of it.
Well, I think the point that we would really strongly agree with is the importance of the engagement across all those sectors. So the infrastructure side, the local authority side, and the customers or the user side. If those conversations aren't connected, then there's a lot of opportunity for things to be confused or slowed. And having the networks kind of aligned with in a kind of a two-way flow of information with the local authorities and with customers like fleets and CPOs that are looking to put that infrastructure in on the charging side. Triangulating that conversation is the really important focus that we definitely agree with.
Sorry, James, just to add, because I should have said it, and I know Matt will. Accessibility for vans. So we're not just talking about the size of the bay and the length of the cable, but quite often there are height restrictions. So if there are, council car parks, park and rides, things like that, they just can't get access to some of those facilities. But also things like bookability and the ability to use an EV fuel card across the network. So I think one of the EV fuel cards probably covers about 80% of the market now, but there's still no universal coverage. And also we do an annual Road to Zero report card where we map progress. We try every year to try and plot out how many charge points are bookable, and we're really struggling. If anyone can help me, Vicky, you might have the answer.
I was going to say, if I knew there was somebody on the panel that could.
Probably speak to Martin, because quite idea how a booking solution. So I think that'd be a good place to start, maybe.
I'll come back to you on that.
It's priority now number 79 on your list of things. Actually, we're back to you, Catherine. And you wanted to talk about infrastructure. Are you going to mention vans again? Lorna's going to be delighted for like a fifth time in a session, but
I think I've kind of covered my infrastructure points out in the general conversation. Yeah, it's that ongoing engagement with local authorities and with the charging industry to make sure that we do have fit for fleet charging infrastructure. And and yeah, just making sure that we've got the right chargers in the right places for all users and all vehicle types. That's it really.
Fantastic. Well, look, I think we've got 3 more minutes. Of those who are a trade body member, is there anything you think that we've missed for the collaboration between the 4 groups we've got here? Or if you're from a local authority, you've been mentioned quite a bit in this session too. How can we work better with you? Does anybody want to stand up for the last moment of the day? No, none of them do. Well, look, I hope we have taken notes of where all that collaboration is going to be in the next year. Some personal news from me. This is actually my last, in fact, in 28 minutes will be my last 28 minutes of CEO of EVA England, as I'm going to Octopus EV on Monday. When Alec got me here, he thought I was going to be this independent person that's got trade body experience. As it turns out, I'm ending it, and I'm actually a member of 3 of the 4 people here. So I will be able to, as of Monday, make sure that we keep them on track. And if there's a way I can get Octopus to be an ENA, they're trying to build a grid from Morocco. Maybe that's the way in, I don't know. Anyway, thank you to our panelists. I hope that was a good way to end the day. And I think I'm going to hand over now to Alec.